We're back again, episode 3 now of our podcast, which we think we now have a name for.
Yeah. Do you want to unveil it?
I mean, how about we do it together?
The
Never Board of Trade podcast. So
Yes.
I think I'm excited for this. And so Never Board of Trade, I think has a ring. I think it's funny. I think it's clever.
It's
just
true.
Enough.
Yeah.
And it's true. We're never bored.
No. Exactly.
So hopefully it doesn't come back and bite us in the butt where other people say it turns into a terrible pun that people use against us.
Yeah. BORED.
Important distinction to point out. Absolutely.
There you go.
We're not anti the institution that we work for.
Never.
So episode 3 now, and it's been great. We started off on a YouTube video.
Yeah.
Now we have YouTube videos, Spotify, and I believe Amazon. So our plans, our humble plans for world domination are just starting to take root, which is fantastic.
Right. That's right. Yeah. Let's see if people actually still listen to long form content.
Absolutely. And now we've got a new camera setup thanks to Josh. So hopefully we'll appear more natural as we talk to each other.
Absolutely.
As opposed to cameras as well. So I'm excited for today's conversation.
Yeah. Same.
All right.
Why don't you start off?
Yeah. So it was an interesting week this week. We had our State of the Region, which is our annual luncheon, bringing together leaders from across Peel region. And it's a fun event for us to do because it really brings together, leadership not just from the Brampton Board of Trade, but it's our opportunity to work with the Mississauga Board of Trade and the Caledon Chamber of Commerce as well.
Our friends.
Our friends. Yeah. And we work on many of the same issues from an advocacy perspective. We have some members that overlap.
Yes.
And the truth of the matter is that most of the people who live in our community don't really know where the borders between Brampton, Mississauga, and Caledon are.
Yeah.
Or if they do, it doesn't really affect how they live or work because you may work in one community and live in the other, or work and live in one community and shop in the other. So this is really our opportunity to talk about some of these like larger pan issues.
Yeah.
And we had representation from the region of Peel talking about Peel region. So the institution of the region of Peel. Mm-hmm. So Gary Kent, the CAO there. We also had some great conversations. We had Daniel Tish from the OCC talking about sort of the economic forecast regionally and from Ontario. Karen Mazurkiewicz from Toronto Pearson talking about some of the investments that they're making to really drive the economy here locally. And then Yando Yanika, who's the regional chair, who always does a great job of sort of like,
he's great.
What's the big picture? And it was a lot of hope, lots of great stuff there. So I think for those who attended, it was a really, really great event.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear your perspective because one of the things we heard about the event, it was well attended to be sure, but there were some people who chose not to go to the event. Yeah. And when I was just part of my day-to-day outreach, talking to folks and so forth, among the reasons people didn't come was because we did a State of the Region event at the beginning of February.
State of the City.
Sorry, State of the City event. Yeah. Thank you. At the beginning of February, which is our annual conversation with the folks in Brampton. And the highlight there is Mayor Patrick Brown talking about economic forecast for the city of Brampton. And it really brings out huge numbers, fantastic event. But people really didn't feel that they differentiated or understood why we were doing an event around Peel region so recently after doing a whole event around city of Brampton.
Yeah.
And I think I get it. Like to me, there's a whole difference in those conversations. We had very different 100%. Types of speakers and a different format. But it was interesting to me that I don't think people really get the difference. And maybe that's us. Maybe we have to do a better job of explaining. But like, what's your read on that?
I think part of that's true. I think we're like kind of nerds on this topic a little bit. We the nuance and the difference is clear as day to us.
Yeah.
But I think to the let's say the average taxpayer who's just paying their taxes, there isn't a profound philosophical difference between their regional government, their municipal government. It's government at the end of the day, and it's municipal government at the end of the day. But I do think part of it is a couple things. Maybe there is that civic literacy piece. Maybe we can do a better job of telling that story of the difference between our upper tier and lower tier governments.
Yeah.
But I think also we might have been seeing. So these events are successful. I mean,
again, not knocking the event itself. It was just the feedback I got from the people who weren't there.
Right,
that I found was intriguing.
So I think there's that civic literacy piece that's really important. I think another aspect of it is that just a couple months ago we had State of the City. To your point, then we have this other event called State of the Region.
Yeah.
So I mean, like maybe we should rebrand it there. I don't know.
Sure.
But also, I think it might be beneficial to maybe push it later in the year as well. Maybe
give new topics to emerge. Almost. People be hungry for that type of conversation.
No, absolutely.
I can see that.
And also, I will say, like last year, disillusion was the centerpiece of the conversation. This year, tariffs dominated. Next year, is a municipal election year as well. So
for sure, no, you're right. You sort of get handed the topic
Yeah.
sometimes, and it's worth saying again. I don't want to say this thing was
Yeah.
a failure in any way.
Yeah.
Like our attendance was up more than 20%
Yeah.
from last year.
Yeah.
So it's not as though people don't want it, but I'm always looking for those opportunities to improve.
100%.
And this was kind of one out of left field for me. And to your point, like I always wonder. We care about this stuff so much, and I
Yeah.
think about this stuff so much that I worry sometimes I have blind spots in terms of how other people think about it, which is among the reasons I like doing this podcast. I'm hoping
Yeah.
people will get back to us and say, yeah, we think that too, or no, you're totally misreading this, guys, and here's how you need to think about it differently.
No, 100%. And I think also part of this as well is I think maybe we can do a better job of having, regional pride
Yeah.
as well. It was a weird year last year with disillusion, all that, but Mississauga, Caledon, Brampton, these three municipalities alone
Yeah.
are make up one of the most economically significant corridors in this country,
North America.
Yeah. And I think we can, frankly, at all levels,
Yeah.
do a better job of telling that story. And from an advocacy perspective, because that's where I come from.
Yeah.
Like Moaz keeps telling me this. I think Peel Region has the population of Manitoba.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like, why aren't we leveraging that when we're advocating, right?
No, it's funny. Like, so it's an interesting way to think about it. So
Yeah.
I because of how I think about things, I think about it from a governance perspective,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
do people understand the nuance of how this level of government works versus another?
Yeah.
And, it manifests to me often like when members call us about issues they're working on, and
Yeah.
I'm having this issue with the buses or having this issue with the roads, and you have to go through the whole, well, that's a city road versus a municipal
Yeah.
road versus a regional road, and here's the why, and here's how this works. But you're right, like maybe it's something way simpler. Maybe it's just that we don't have a regional identity.
Yeah.
In the way that I don't know, haven't lived there, but you get the sense like when people talk about Niagara region,
Yeah.
I think people understand what that means. Like that's a defined space. I don't know if there's a sense of Niagara region pride,
Yeah.
but it feels like that's more of a place. Whereas maybe Peel region doesn't feel like a place, and maybe we don't have enough of an identity as like, what do you call a person from Peel? A Peelite?
Yeah.
And maybe until we know what
Peeler.
a peeler,
Yeah.
unless we know what what it is to be a peeler and have an identity that we've defined as being part of that.
100%.
Maybe it's always going to be hard to engage people in what it is to therefore let's talk to the leaders of Peel.
Yeah, absolutely. So food for thought for next year as well, and even throughout the year. I mean, there are issues that are regional in nature that we can start thinking about. But moving on to the election.
Yeah.
So we're sort of heading into the middle of this campaign period. We're preparing for debates. Tariffs have sort of dominated the conversation yet again. It was Liberation Day yesterday. What's your assessment of where we're at this election?
From a tariff perspective or an election perspective?
Let's say from an election perspective, yeah.
An election perspective, I think it's a bit of a bummer, actually. Yeah. Like it strikes me as kind of disappointing in that I really feel like we're in the midst of what could be a very historical election.
Mm-hmm.
There are issues that need to be addressed that could have generational consequence in terms of what they mean to our nation and many of the communities like Brampton within this country. Affordability, skill gap, investments in healthcare, where we are with immigration, things of this nature. Like these are huge seismic issues we need to be thinking about. And yet it feels like all we're doing right now is being reactive to what's happening south of the border. Prime Minister Carney has had to twice already pause his campaign in this week to deal with trade issues and take time off from campaigning. And that's it's the right thing to do. I'm not being critical of it.
Yeah.
What I'm pointing out is that I don't think we're using this opportunity to be reflective enough about what's happening here in Canada. And instead we're being forced to put all our make the determination of who's going to be the prime minister of this country for the next 4 years based on who we think is going to be able to best negotiate with the Trump administration in the next couple of months.
Yeah.
And that just feels wrong to me. And we had our Policy and Government Relations Committee meeting this morning and, kind of put it out to them as well. Like, I feel like I'm in this existential crisis myself of how much time do we spend talking about tariffs versus how much time do we spend on the work that is really important in this community in Brampton, building the foundation on the issues that matter to us based on our business confidence index and all the stuff we know to really be the years and years of impact, I don't want to diminish what the tariffs are, but it
It's also,
bums me out that this is
yeah,
all we're talking about right now.
it's also like, what can we really do?
Yeah.
I mean, not to make it sound hopeless, but it's a real thing. We should talk about it.
Yeah.
It has, you know, detrimental effects on businesses here, businesses in the US. We should talk about it. At the same time, you know, there are issues that are going to outlast this presidency.
That's right.
That we need to be talking about now.
Yeah.
And part of me wishes, like, I have resentment towards the Trump administration for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
One of them is it took the oxygen out of this campaign, this federal campaign, because it could have been about so many other things, right? And for me, especially as a young person, but also when we layer in the fact that based on our business confidence index, based on our conversations with members, housing is by far the existential crisis of our times. And I really wanted this election to be about housing, and to some degree, not to there's been a lot of pronouncements from each of the party leaders around housing, and you know, interesting ideas that you know, I've written about, we've talked about, but I mean, like, I'm looking for some real ingenuity here, and I feel like it's just the attention's being taken away from that a little bit.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, I have a kid who's of voting age.
Yeah.
And I don't want to put words in his mouth. I've not talked to him about this particular election yet.
Yeah.
But I can guarantee you, just knowing him as, you know, a young person, 21 years old, you know, getting like started in his life, I know I'm going to have to, you know, needle him a bit to get out and vote, because, and I see it from his perspective. It's not that he's not an engaged person and he lives in a household where people are very active in their community. There's nothing inspiring about this election when all you're talking about is the doom and gloom of a tariff issue. Yeah. You, in addition to everything else, I think the thing that you made there is a point that I think is really important we talk about, is that, you know, we're seeing declining turnouts at the polls, election after election after election. And some of that's just, I think there's a malaise and there's a cynicism about politics in general that has definitely accelerated in the past few years post-COVID. But I also think when you don't give anyone, you don't give an individual something to vote for, and we only have things to vote against, and we only have depressing things to talk about, and party leaders are running down our own country instead of selling a vision of what could be, then what are people voting for? So in that other way you're describing, like it's a huge bummer right now.
No, I completely agree. You know what's interesting? According to StatsCan, do you know the number one reason why people don't vote?
Busy? I have no idea what.
Yeah, literally, they say they're too busy.
Right. So which is always code for I don't care.
I don't care. You can't tell me you're too busy when, you know, Netflix is still around and everyone's watching Severance and scrolling TikTok.
Are you watching Severance?
I'm not.
Season 2 is so good.
It's
so good.
It's on Apple TV.
Apple
right?
TV.
They gotta like bundle them together. There's too many.
Oh, you mean like just have like one giant cable network where you just like get all the channels?
Right. It's a horseshoe theory. The idea that people are too busy just, to me, means that electoral politics just hasn't made the case enough for people to care about. And I think part of it is just the lack of inspiring candidates. We've seen this routinely, frankly, with the provincial election as well. I mean, you know, I think the last two provincial elections, it's just been kind of a vote for status quo, because there hasn't really been a concept of change on.
What does better look like? Like I haven't heard that. Now you touched on something that is important though. Like you said, like this is the issue that matters most to you. Yeah. So let's like live in a hypothetical world, for instance, where tariffs weren't an issue right now, where we knew they were going to be dealt with, and so we're able to focus on issues that mattered most. Yeah. You said housing.
Okay. Yeah.
Why? And to your point, we've written about it, we've talked about it, but some people are maybe listening to this for the first time right now. Yeah. Why is housing the issue for you?
Oh man, so many reasons. I mean, I think, you know, I've talked about the new class war that it has been brewing for a while around home ownership versus those who don't own, who rent, as an example. I think that, you know, when we create this bifurcated society, there are social and moral implications of that. We create a polarized society. People aren't happy. People aren't self-actualizing. There are real consequences there. But from a board of trade perspective, I mean, from the work that we do, it's a workforce issue. Yeah. And, you know, I've said this actually I've said this in different contexts, but when you see folks that are moving outside of the GTA, outside of Brampton. They're going to more remote communities because they're driving until they can qualify.
Yep.
Right. They're still working in the GTA.
Yeah.
They're still working in Brampton.
Yeah.
And so they have to commute into this region. And that, of course, exacerbates the congestion problem.
Sure.
But ultimately, there is a real challenge, economic development challenge, when housing is not co-located with where you work.
Oh, absolutely. Now suddenly, whatever you're paying me is not going to be enough if now I have to factor in gas, wear and tear on my car.
100%.
By the way, I lose 2 hours of my life every day driving back and forth. At some point, this community is going to lose that individual working here, or that employer is going to lose profitability and the capacity to expand that business because they're having to overpay employees to do the drive into the community, to say nothing of the congestion, to say nothing of the impact on the environment of all that greenhouse gas emissions.
100%. And the productivity implications as well. It's, being stuck in traffic. And, I think it also makes Brampton, comparatively less competitive than another jurisdiction that has a job that, a qualified candidate might say, well, I could drive 2 hours to Brampton or 1 hour to this other community. Right. So there's all of that calculus that goes into the housing challenge. And, our perspective has been, we need to see an industrial scale level of home building. And we're looking to the federal government, I think, for we it's interesting. We talk about a jurisdiction a lot, right? I think when it comes to the housing crisis, like the climate crisis, doesn't matter what the jurisdiction is.
Sure.
You got to come up with your ambitious plan to just explode the number of housing completions that we're going to achieve each year.
No, I feel like we are. I've joked about this. Like this feels like post-war, rebuilding, FDR, New Deal type stuff needs to happen, where we need to mobilize all the resources that 100%. We have available to us, or that our government has available to it, to make that happen. And then recognizing all the spillover effects that come about. Like it solves a number of the challenges that you're talking about here. But B, when we talk about skilled jobs, job creation, 100%. The economy, productivity, all those other pieces start to happen as well. Because one of the things the government can do is it can make jobs for people. And if it steers that job creation activity in the right way, it can be super beneficial to a community on multiple levels.
Book recommendation: Paulina Cherneva, The Jobs Guarantee. This is exactly what Jaipaul's talking about. We should have book.
Is this a plagiarism thing?
Yeah.
Did I just get outed?
I will say, and this isn't an endorsement, but Prime Minister Carney, Liberal leader, has announced that if elected, he will put together a agency, a government body whose sole purpose is to build 500,000 homes every single year. That's sort of the level of big thinking.
It's got to be really bold. It's really got to bulk the trend. I'm curious. One of the things we've talked about as well. I know this is the big issue for you is housing. Among the other issues that we've been talking about, making sure that we bring up in the debates. And by the time we record the next one of these, the debates would have happened. So we'll have some commentary about that soon enough. Is the notion of continuation of funding commitments, particularly if there's a change in government. And one of those pieces is specifically for the LRT here in Brampton. Big funding announcement a couple of weeks ago. But the funding won't be dispersed until next year. So what happens between now and then is critical. The reason I bring it up is when we talk about the housing piece, access to transit funding is tied to housing starts. Like that is one of the tools that the federal government has. So yes, we have work to do to make sure there's accountability and they follow through. We're not abdicating that. But while we're on the topic of like, what can a government do to get the economy going? And if housing is important, they also have other carrots of funding, not just like we'll build the houses, but you want your transit money, you want other funding that we know municipalities desperately need or that provinces could use, healthcare, otherwise. Like, why are we not tying these pieces together more closely? Because to me, that's a really intriguing way to go about it. Is if you want your dessert, you have to eat your dinner too.
100%. And this has been the Canadian way when we consider our sort of system of federalism. This has been how the federal government has enforced universal health care, as an example, or negotiations around childcare. It's the same thing here. And part of our thinking at the Board of Trade is. One of the questions we will be asking is for each candidate to commit to funding this LRT.
Yeah.
And also, we should mention the baseline funding that Brampton Transit is set to receive from the Canada Public Transit Fund, which is the fund that you're referring to. You know, should there be a conservative government, we want continuity on these projects. Public transit, like these aren't luxuries, right? There has been no city in the world that has reliably grown with vehicle dependence. And Brampton Transit is a North American success story, and we have to increase our investments in public transit.
Absolutely. You know, I wonder, like, do we want to be so bold in the debates to suggest that one needs to sign a pledge? Like how
I like that.
I think it's really important, right? So we can say,
I like that.
Would you commit? And then like, yada. I don't want to yada. Like I almost wonder if the question we put together is some specific phrasing. That says, if elected, would you sign a pledge that says, I commit to, and then we define very clearly X, Y, and Z, and really put these individuals on the spot to show, you know, what their cards are. I don't know, how do you feel about that?
Listen, I shout out to Metamorphosis. They did this during the provincial election. They had a pledge that they had candidates from across the aisle sign, and you know, maybe we borrow from our friends from Metamorphosis.
I think there's something there. Like I think, you know, coming back to, you know, what's important. I think if we joke about the office with other things, with events and so forth, right? But it's the language used. If we don't treat it like it's important, we can't expect other people to treat it like it's important.
100%.
So it's all well and good for you and I to talk about these topics. For you, it's housing. I don't disagree with that. For me, it might lean a little bit more toward immigration and skilled work. But either way, like, I mean, these are key issues. The most important thing I think we're talking about here, this is not about tariffs.
No.
This is not about US, and this is not about Donald Trump. This election is about things that really matter. And unfortunately, because of what's happening right now, we're not having conversations like what you're describing. Like, here's my big audacious idea. And everyone come and vet it and tear it apart, because we're actually engaging in real concepts and real ideas that we're going to move Canadians forward. All we're talking about is how we're trying to appease somebody else, which is, again, so frustrating. Long story short, I think if we think these are issues that are important, I think we really need to drive home they're really important. And I think one of the ways we could do that is, I don't have to say it has to be a pledge. I know I'm springing this on you. We've not talked about this ahead of time.
But I love it.
But I think we need to rethink really boldly about the commitments we get out of the candidates to make sure they feel that they're not ironclad. We can't litigate these things later. But I want to make sure that we're really clear about what the ask is, and we're really clear about what their answers are.
No, totally.
So that we can tell our membership, like, hey, we believe this is important. We held those that you know, choose to be in power to account.
Absolutely. Let's talk more about that.
I think it'd be really fun. All right.
Cool.
So while I've been talking, you made an allusion earlier, you know, like you've been talking all over the place about different things, and you've been doing an amazing job. Lots of articles and stuff being written on a bunch of topics lately. Affordability, of course, being a key one, but you've done some great stuff about how you're looking at the debates, not the debates, the election, how you look at leadership. I've been doing some writing around tariffs and the impacts in the community, and it's been getting some attention, not just within Brampton, but outside. And you did a story with, you were on the National earlier this week. Congratulations.
Yes, and Mohit Sharma from Zokim as well.
Absolutely. And first off, how proud was your mom?
Oh, she was just beyond beside herself. Absolutely.
Everyone in the greater family knew you were on the National, I assume.
No, absolutely. And you know what's interesting about that? I was getting a bunch of messages, and the thing I'm most impressed by is how many people actually still watch the National. Religiously.
Absolutely. No, it's, I mean, you know, we could get into the whole defund the CBC. That might be a whole other topic. We're going to run out of time. But yeah, it is still an institution. And so I'm so happy you had that opportunity. We've had other opportunities to speak to local media. You and I did an interview with a publication in Toronto earlier today.
That's right.
I had an outreach earlier today about doing some media in Germany next week. If people want to talk about what's happening here election-wise. What is it about Brampton that people are so interested in? Full transparency, I was involved in an election 20 years ago. And at that time, the story that was covered, BBC World came to Brampton, did an interview with me about what is it about Brampton and this particular community and its identity and how it plays out in politics nationally.
Right.
There's something about it going back 20 years and to today, it's the exact same story. What is it about us?
I don't know. I think there's something about Brampton that I think symbolize. This is my just ideas. It symbolizes this. You know, immigrant come to this country, you work hard, set up a life. It's almost this Canadian dream. And not to romanticize Brampton. Brampton has challenges as well, but I do think our significant immigrant population, and just sort of well, I mean, in the context of this election,
Yeah.
6 ridings, very electorally significant.
Yeah.
It's routinely a swing riding as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
But we're also very heavily populated.
Yeah.
We've surpassed Mississauga as well. But I do think there's something about our composition that is interesting to communities outside of Brampton,
Yeah.
because we're kind of we're telling the story every day, right?
I feel like a lot of us were writing the story every day.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it for me, is like what I think interesting about Brampton is why I love this job is I feel like, actually, I don't feel like we were in the storytelling business. I think we're in the story writing business.
That's a great way to put it, because it is like, it's sort of a city in its adolescence in a way.
Yeah.
And we're all like, we have ideas and visions of what we could be. And you hear this a lot from Mayor Brown, council, they want to see, you see all these renderings of what downtown Brampton could be when the SPA is lifted and all of that. But it's like there is a trajectory. We don't know where it's going exactly, but it's like exciting,
So because the story's not fully written, you think there's something interesting about that?
I think so. I think so. Yeah, and I think I think the work that we're doing, not to again pat ourselves on the back too much, but I think because we don't have a robust media landscape here.
Yeah.
When we do write about Brampton, and we make videos about Brampton.
Yeah, it always feels new and interesting and novel.
Exactly.
There's something there. There's something you brought up, actually. You shared it when you did your interview with David Common earlier, or last week when it aired earlier this week. Is that piece of we seem to be a flexible community too in terms of how we vote. Oftentimes there's a consistency among the ridings across Brampton. But but that's within an election, not from election to election. So, for instance, it was all liberal at the province for quite some time, and then when it flipped, it went all conservative. And now we've seen continuity of conservative government here. But there's also been times when we had a disproportionate amount of NDP representation, coming from Brampton. Now it's been for a while liberal at the federal level, while we have conservative at the provincial level. So there's not always been this sort of consistency. I don't think we're always predictable, and therefore I think for campaigns and therefore for stories, there's this idea too of like, it's not a given what Brampton is going to be. There's a curiosity, I think, like, how will this community vote, because we don't always vote the same way. And I wonder if that's also part of it. There's a curiosity about what's going to happen here within an election, in a way that I think certain ridings, it's almost a shock when they don't vote a particular way, right? I think about Toronto, there's certain ridings where it's just like, the story is not who they voted for. The story is like, oh my gosh, they didn't vote for the person that like has always been voted for like for the last 50 years in that particular riding, right?
No, 1,000%. I think that is 100% what is, because we're still writing the story. It can go in any which way. And part of what, so that piece of the interview with Common was, I think the number one thing people, they tell me resonated with them about that interview is pragmatism over ideology. And I think part of that is that you really kind of have to earn the community's trust here. And we see it all the time. Stephen Harper, 2006, when the Conservatives first formed government, he relied on Bill Davis's endorsement. And the red Tory vote. And he had to come to this community and stand
do the thing he had to do.
Exactly. Jagmeet Singh, when he ran in the what was formerly known as Bramley Gore Malton, that riding was never orange. Part of it is that, and then later on you see Sarah Singh, Guruthan, and now it's all blue. So there is this there's this concept of you kind of have to earn your way through this community that I think isn't the same in Alberta, where it reliably votes conservative, or in Toronto, which is reliably progressive.
No, anyway, so it's super fun. And I'm curious to see how these stories play out. I love that people want to tell our story. To your point, when there's lack of a lot of media coverage here in Brampton, all due respect to our friends in the South Asian media and the Guardian and so forth, that their resources are limited, and their scope is their reach rather is therefore sometimes limited as well. I love that there are people who want to tell the story of Brampton. It's obviously something that we're really keen to do, and so I'm really happy that we have people who are going to help us do it.
Absolutely.
So with that, I think that's a lot of stuff for
Yeah.
for this week. We've got some successful events.
Yeah.
We got our wish list for the election and
Yeah.
what we can do hopefully to steer the conversation there
Yeah.
in the debates over the next couple of weeks. And by the time people start listening to this, they'll hope some of those stories about us. If you haven't, people can go online and see your CBC interviews on their website.
Yeah.
The other publications you and I've been talking to, no doubt, do some Googling. You'll find some more commentary from Vijay and I on what's happening here in Brampton. And by the time we do one of these next, it'll be post debate.
Yeah,
and I am so excited to see. Hopefully, we get a lot more fireworks than we got at the provincial election. I'm really pumped for what that day is going to be like.
Me too. Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. Yeah. Let's work on that pledge as well.
I think we're going to pledge. I think we'll pledge to pledge.
Yes,
How's
exactly.
that?
Sounds good.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching. We'll talk to you all soon.
Take care.
Take care.